Welcome to the Man Show. Today we're going to... Hold on. These guys aren't manly enough. Oh, these guys still aren't manly enough. Yeah, there we go. These guys are manly. What do y'all want to do? Let's drink some beer. Let's sing some country songs. Let's go hunt some monsters. Ah! Well, that didn't take long. Fight each other! Ah! Let's go over the B-plot briefly with Castiel and the unconscious Sam. It was serviceable. I am curious if we're supposed to be okay with how Cass treated Sergei. Not that I'm saying the guy's an angel or anything. I mean, Sergei's not an angel, not him, obviously. He is one. It's kind of weird that Cass treats that guy harsher than he ever treated, Rowena or Crowley. And both of them did actual bad, awful things to our heroes and innocent people. This Russian dude had a procedure that was untested. And think about it. How could he have even possibly tested or refined this process? Seems kind of petty. I mean, I'm glad Castiel isn't letting himself get pushed around and so forth, but threatening a teenage girl, that seems a little far. To tell you the truth, when Sergei asked for that, was it the key of death or black key, whatever it was, that he wanted, I was actually kind of hoping that Castiel would get him a kind of be careful what you wish for a moment. Maybe we'd see Billy show up and otherwise get involved to scare Sergei, or however you pronounce his name. I think that could have been really entertaining. Then again, I do just like seeing Billy. And I like seeing Old Death. Could we get a spinoff of just Reapers trying to run around and clean up all the Winchester's messes? By far the standout of this episode was Christian Kane, which I was thrilled with him showing up, as I've been a fan of him since Angel and Secondhand Lions, and he's my favorite of the Leverage team. I think Hollywood really messed up not making that guy more of an action star. I need a figure for him. Yeah, here we go. Of course, this episode is just packed full of references, both to prior Supernatural episodes and to classic manly media. In fact, it had so many references, there are some I'm not even sure about. For example, when Dean and Lee do their handshake, was that supposed to be a reference to Predator when Arnold greets Carl Weathers? Or is it just supposed to be a generic manly greeting? And was the monster Lee had in his closet supposed to look like a creature from his old show, Angel? To be fair, the bar being called Swayze, which had Dean asking about Roadhouse rules, proved that there were plenty of references not at all subtle. And besides, who cares? I'm enjoying myself anyway. It certainly looked like the two stars were enjoying themselves, as this episode got very indulgent with not one, but two songs being sung on screen. If the boys went and defeated Chuck with the karaoke competition, I might accept that finale. I've got to take a minute and do some nerdy nitpicking, or I'm going to damage my reputation. So first, there was a line where Lee is talking to Dean and mentions that before a hunt, John would play a song on the jukebox saying, "This is real music." Now, the usual implication of that line is to show a divide between children and their parents on their taste of music. The problem is, there's a line from episode 3.10, Dream a Little Dream of Me, where Dean, in a dream, says to, himself, "What are the things that you want? What are the things that you dream? I mean, your car? That's your dad's. Your favorite leather jacket? Dad's. Your music? Dad's. Do you even have an original thought?" Meaning the tapes in the Impala, well, those were from John. It seems that John was the rock and roll and the metal fan that taught that love to Dean. It's not like the line can't work. I mean, I can believe that John liked country and rock and roll. Plenty of people do. But it does seem odd given what we know, and for an episode that was just so tight on references and continuity and callbacks that it just kind of stuck out. It also bugged me that when Lee asked, how many did you save to Dean? I wanted to see Dean just start naming off the literal billions from all their apocalypses. Don't get me wrong, I can kind of grasp Dean not really wanting to just unload that kind of thing onto another person at random, but this is supposed to be like the best friend he has ever had. His bro. If he can tell anybody this kind of stuff, that would be him. And also, I just kind of want a moment for the boys to say, we have saved all 7 billion people on this planet from death and slavery and chattel and worse. I'm normally against a character bragging. I recommend people avoid doing that, but it's been 15 years. This is the last season. The boys they've now earned a moment of, let me tell you who I am. And finally, there's a big question of, if Lee has been kidnapping people for over 15 years now, how has he never been caught? Well, what if this episode wasn't what it seemed? Time for a really nerdy discussion on writing. So, there's this very old fanfic trope that I'll just call the long-lost Blake. Even if you haven't read any fanfic, you can guess what I mean. The most popular one is the long-lost relative. You have a long-lost sibling, or a long-lost parent, or a long-lost father's, brother's, nephew's, cousin's former roommate. That's the most typical. But you can also have long-lost friends, and long-lost lovers are also pretty popular in this genre. You'll probably also notice that this is a very old hack writing trope as well. And Supernatural has played it both straight and a little tongue-in-cheek. So there I was, enjoying the episode, and I guess that Lee was probably going to be the bad guy after 10 minutes of his appearance, because he's the only guest star with much of a speaking role, when they get into a fight, and then he says that line, "I'm you, Dean." That got me thinking. Ever since that ham-fisted werewolf brothers metaphor in episode 1505, Proverbs 17:3, I've been suspicious of almost everything that happens in the show now. Notice how the witches last week, there were 2 of them, almost like siblings? This week, we have a parallel to Dean, down to the level that Lee owns a bar staffed with a sexy brunette, which is just like the dream Michael had Dean trapped in. Is all this just a normal effort by the episode's writer, Jeremy Adams? Or is this supposed to be a clue about Chuck's handiwork? Is Lee really an old friend? Or was he invented recently by Chuck to set up his dark endgame? Has he been getting away with it for 15 years because he never existed? Was he intended to be a dark parallel, just like those werewolf brothers, to push Dean onto the path that Chuck wants? That would go a long way toward explaining some of the things that are a little off in this episode. Of course, I'll also freely admit that the season setting up Chuck is messing with the boys is giving the actual writers of the show just a blank check to get away with any possible mistake. And if this wasn't a deliberate setup, but rather an open-ended avenue where the showrunner knew he could use any mistakes the writers make to his advantage and set things up so he could capitalize on them, I'll admit, that raises my respect for this effort a lot more. Now, just get semi-serious for a minute. These two did do a great job. It's kind of funny because the weekend this aired, we had a get-together with family friends. And, after the meal, the men kind of drift to one room and talk while the women drift to another room and talk. It's nothing conscious. Just both groups don't really care about the other's topics and neither really want to disturb the other. So it just kind of happens organically. If you take a minute and bounce back and forth between the rooms and listen closely, you kind of notice that there was a rhythm to the conversations. Ignore the topics, just kind of listen to how everyone talks, and you begin to notice that there are certain cadences to men and women's conversations, a certain lyrical style that women have kind of their version of it and men have their unique version. It's a little bit like different styles of music. If you're interested in writing, I'd recommend go people watching and just observe the structure of people's conversations and rhythm. I've noticed that men seem to have a style that kind of reminds you of a game of catch, with each guy getting a turn as the conversation flows. I think I've noticed that you can almost tell how old a friendship is by how fast guys can fall into this pattern. Casual friends, buddies from work, they'll never quite hit that conversational groove perfectly. You'll notice a lot of starts and stops and stutterings. But your buddy, the one you know since first grade, the pal who would end up in jail beside you because of a prank, it takes seconds for those guys to just get a flawless conversation going about literally any topic. I don't know how much of this was to the writing or the directing or Jared and Christian's acting, but the two of them pulled off this sense of male friendship flawlessly. And I really noticed that their conversation had that rhythm down perfectly. And because of that, while my brain was kind of wondering about the logic, my gut totally believed that these two guys were the best of friends and they were together again after way too long apart. Those tiny little details, they can be the hardest to get right. So for everyone involved, y'all did a good job. This episode ended with Sam declaring that, Chuck is wounded, and the boys all getting hope that maybe they'll be able to win. But next episode is the last one before a break. It's only a week break, and that still makes me wonder if they're setting up for the mid-season finale, or whatever you'd call it. And those have a certain pattern to them. They'll give the boys just a bit of hope before dashing it. Since season 5, this has just become formulaic. The latter seasons, they don't seem to realize why Abandon All Hope was such a powerful episode. And since then, these repeated fake outs just don't have the impact. But we can discuss that more if and when this finale happens. Maybe it won't be next week. Maybe I'll be wrong. But until then, I give this episode really solid 3 shells. Plus. I mean, for me personally, it's a bit of a 4. I just really enjoyed it. But objectively, it didn't have anything especially impactful. But it is still really, really solid. This is the kind of episode that should be the baseline for judging others by, and I think it's going to be kind of a shame we won't get to see a whole lot more work by this writer. Still, here's hoping the quality streak stays alive, and I'll see you next week. If you want to subscribe, feel free to. Or don't. I don't care. Let's all go sing some karaoke.